How's it going, everybody? Bryan, Alvarez, and Dave Meltzer here, Wrestling Observer Radio, August 14, 2018, figure4online.com/wrestlingobserver.com. Terrible month for pro wrestling continues. The death of Jim the Anvil Neidhart, 63 years old. Too soon.
Yeah.
One half of the Hart Foundation, probably most famous for that. Worked for WWF, WCW. Father of Natty Neidhart.
New Japan. He worked everywhere. Yeah.
Yep. Tell us about Jim Neidhart.
Oh, jeez. I first heard of Jim Neidhart when I was like a little kid because he was national champion and he set the state record in the shot put when he was at senior at Harbor. I think it was Newport Harbor High School, but it was Newport Beach, California, and the records and that record's stayed when I was in high school. That record was still like really strong. I mean, it was still a record because when I was in high school, there was a guy who was one of our football stars was a shot putter as well, and he ended up winning the state meet, and he was going for that record. I think he didn't even come within 3 or 4 feet of it, though. I mean, Neidhart was a really excellent shot putter. He he was well known in the sports world. I mean, not super well known as far as high school, but it was in the papers and stuff. And I always, studied that stuff really well. And then he went to UCLA, and I think he went to Reno, but was placed in major meets. He was an Olympic team hopeful, but he wasn't quite at that level. There's a guy named, I think he and Terry Albritton, and I actually have to talk to the Harts, tomorrow probably. I'm going to try to talk to Ross Hart and get more. But as I recall, he and Terry Albritton, who was an even more famous shot putter, who went to Stanford, they went up to Calgary, I guess, to train to be wrestlers. And Terry Albritton, as far as I know, never even wrestled. I don't know how long he lasted, but Jim married Ellie very quickly, like in 79, very soon after they got there. So Jim was in, and he wrestled there, Stampede Wrestling, but he went all over. I mean, he went to Florida. He briefly was in Georgia. He did he went to Memphis, Mid-South, probably with Butch Reed as a tag team, and then feuding with Butch Reed. They gave him a pretty big push because, Bill Watts liked guys like that. But I mean, he did well everywhere, in the sense of New Japan, he got pushed. He was a big, powerful guy. And in that era, that was the kind of guys that people liked as heels, a little bit. He tried to play in the NFL. He didn't play. I don't think he played college football at all. In fact, I know he didn't. But he was so strong that he tried out for the NFL and he tried out for the Raiders and the Cowboys. And then right after he got cut by the Cowboys was when he played preseason. After he got cut by the Cowboys, he came to Stampede. And so he was, a regular there. And then when Vince McMahon bought Stu to get his TV, he bought Stu Hart's company, allegedly for $1 million, although he only paid $100,000, which is a story in and of itself. The story is essentially that he promised Stu $100,000 a year for 10 years, and part of the deal was that Stu couldn't promote wrestling anymore, but Vince was looking for Stu's TVs because Stu had a good TV network, and actually there was a lot of heat at the time because Stampede was getting really hot, especially in Vancouver. They were drawing some big crowds. The promotion was starting to, have a real hot spell. And they had just gotten back from Vancouver, and they had done a show that did 6,500 people, which was really strong for that promotion. And when they got back, Bruce, who was the booker, was watching TV, and they announced that Stampede Wrestling's been sold. And they hadn't told him a thing, because they, so anyway, what happened was that Bruce, the gist was that, Stu couldn't promote anymore. But Stu would be the promoter, and he would get 5% of, I believe it was Calgary and Edmonton. I'm not sure if there were any other cities in that area. Maybe the other cities in the old Stampede territory, but definitely Calgary and Edmonton. That he would get a percentage of that, and then he would get a salary. So Stu was like a local promoter for WWE. And then after the first 100,000, when it came time for the next year's 100,000, I guess Bruce must have promoted some independent shows, or an independent show. I think it may have only been one, maybe two. And Vince used that to say that the deal was broken, and he said that the deal's off, and he didn't pay anymore. Now, by this point, Vince already had all of his TV stations, the network, but he also told Stu that since the deal's off, you can promote locally now. So Stu reopened Stampede Wrestling. So that was the era with Owen Hart and Brian Pillman and Chris Benoit and Johnny Smith and all those guys, which Jim wasn't part of. But when he made the deal with Stu's stipulations for the deal were that he had to hire Dynamite, Bret, Davey Boy Smith, and Jim Neidhart, who were, I guess his top. Well, I mean, Davey and Bret and Neidhart were family, and Dynamite, I guess he felt loyalty because Dynamite was like his big star, and probably was doing Vince a favor because Dynamite Kid at the time was one of the best wrestlers in the world. But at first, it was kind of like when you buy something, and part of the deals is you have to hire members of the family of the promotion, of who you're buying from. It's kind of like you got them, but you don't really want them. So at first there was sort of like this thing of these guys, well, we have these guys and we have to give them a job. And that's kind of how they were treated. But in time, actually at first what happened was they didn't really do anything with any of them. And Dynamite and Davey quit. And they had done a few TVs, they quit, and then while they were gone, actually this is kind of an interesting story too, which also has nothing to do with Jim Neidhart, but I was trading tapes with Joel Watts, who's Bill's son, and he would send me tapes of the Mid-South house shows, and because he would go and tape all those shows. And then I would send him tapes from Japan or other places of guys to look at. So, of course, tapes from Japan, he sees Dynamite and Davey, and he goes crazy. It's, oh, my God, these guys are phenomenal. And he tries to pitch it to his dad, and his dad goes, well, this is when Bill Dundee was the booker. And, he wanted to feud them with the Rock and Roll, bring him in his heels to feud with the Rock and Roll Express. That's Joel's idea. So he pitched it, and then Dundee was like, these guys will never draw money. That was Dundee's reaction. So Bill was like, well, he's the booker, so that's the deal. So then this is a couple of months later, maybe, and not even that much later. It's probably only like 6 weeks, maybe a month or 2 months, if that. And they've already quit WWE at this point, obviously because of all that. So then I heard from Joel, and Joel goes, I convinced my father we want to bring him in to feud with the Rock and Roll Express. And I said, well, 4 days ago, they just signed back with WWE, or WWF at the time. So they went back to WWF. So at some point, the idea all of a sudden was that, Dynamite and Davey are like really good, and that's when they gave him the British Bulldogs name. And, when I heard about them going to WWF, going back from, they made a deal actually where they actually had a deal where they could work All Japan and WWF at the same time, because they were actually making more in All Japan than they were making in WWF, but WWF wanted them, and it wasn't full time. They would do maybe 16 weeks of All Japan, so they'd work WWE the other, 36 weeks a year. And then eventually they started making more money in WWF. Did they drop All Japan? I don't know if they ever fully dropped All Japan, but when they quit WWF, they ended up back in All Japan again. But that was years later. So they were put together as a team, And Bret was kind of like doing nothing, and they didn't really see anything, and they wanted to make him a cowboy, and he didn't want to be a cowboy because, Bret grew up where there were real cowboys, and he wasn't one of them, and he thought that they would see through it, and he didn't want to be like a fake guy in his home city pretending to be a cowboy. And somehow, they came up with the idea, well, we'll put Bret and Jim together, and we'll make him a tag team. And so they put him together, and then they gave him Jimmy Hart. And, they gelled really well, and they worked a program with the Bulldogs. So, you're working with some of the best guys in the business. And, Bret got a lot of confidence back working with those guys because they could really, he knew when he's working with some of these other guys that were big and didn't want to sell for him and this and that, you know what I mean? It wasn't, it wasn't really that great. But when he's working with the Bulldogs, he had, all the confidence in the world because he knew those guys, and he knew, in his mind, Dynamite was the best guy in the business. And, he certainly was close to the best guy in the business at the time, if not the best guy. And Jim was there, and, they were friends, and the Hart Foundation was a great tag team. If you watch the tapes back, Bret obviously was an excellent wrestler, and Jim, could be the big powerhouse guy, which was what they wanted. I mean, without Jim, the way Vince thought of talent, without Jim, Bret probably would have gone nowhere. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, eventually, when Bret started getting really over as part of the team because people started to recognize how good he was. The problem is that when that happened, that was kind of the end for Jim, because Jim is a single. He just didn't have, he was fine, but he didn't stand out. I mean, he had the power. They tried to make Jim and Owen a team. And that, the new Hart Foundation, I don't think that really worked. And Jim, Jim bounced around. He went to WCW, New Japan, got a bunch of stints with WWF over the years, kind of went back and forth. And, that was kind of his career. And then he worked indies, and he was just, whatever. I didn't know Jim well. I know most of the family better than Jim. I met him several times. He was always, nice to me. I only recall, the only thing that I really recall about Jim was one time we were talking, and he was kind of like the life of the party type of thing. And he's talking about, he was living in Tampa, and he was talking about like all the crime in Tampa. And he just goes that it's really bad there. It's, really scary. He goes, but I go out and I don't know what it is. It's like, nobody ever mugs me. And I go, Jim, who's going to mug you? You're freaking 280 pounds. If they're going to mug you, no one's going to look for a fight with a guy your size. And he was just kind of laughing about it, so, but, he had obviously he had his troubles. He went to rehab several times. He was been battling Alzheimer's for a while. The death was absolutely sudden, out of nowhere. Nobody expected it. I guess what happened was it was about very early this morning. He was he was complaining that it was too hot, and they lived in I believe Tampa, and he went to turn down the thermostat because he was too hot, and he I guess had a seizure. I think that's kind of what they think, but he fell. And just fell on the ground, and hit his head on the wall or the floor. And, he, with no control, and I guess he died, pretty quick because, they called the police, they called the paramedics and everything. And I think he was, Ellie's, when she called 911, I think she said that she thought he was dead, right away. So just horrible. It was a real down feeling at the show because Natty and TJ Wilson, Natty's husband, are very, very popular there. And yeah, I mean, it's like he had the laugh, and the goatee, and he was a character. He was one of the characters that were really remembered from the 80s. I mean, I remember one time they had changed the tag team titles. The Rockers had beaten the Hart Foundation for the tag team titles, and it was taped for Saturday Night's Main Event, I believe, but definitely taped for television. And the idea was that they already did the match, and the idea was that they were going to cut Jim and make Bret a single. And for whatever reason, I think Bret went to back, because I remember I was told, this was a weird one, I was told, the guys were being cut before the guys were told. So I had the list with Jim on the list, and I remember reporting it, and they told me. And then they, rescinded it, and Jim wasn't cut. I guess Bret, spoke up for Jim. And then in the decision-making process, they decided, let's just forget about that tag team title change. Because if we're going to keep them together, we'll just keep them together as tag team champions. So they in the city that it took place in, and I forget the city off the top of my head, Fort Wayne, okay. So they said the rope broke.
The top rope broke.
The top rope broke in the match, which actually did happen. And because of that, they ruled that, therefore, the title change wasn't valid. So the Hart Foundation retained the titles. And did the Rockers ever get the tag team titles?
I don't think that was the one time they won the titles, and when it was rescinded, they officially were never tag team champions. Right.
Yeah, because I remember, they were team for years and years, and they were like the best tag team, and they never won the belts. They were supposed to, that was supposed to be a title switch. I mean, it was booked to be a title switch. It was booked to be the end of the Hart Foundation as a team, and then they just did a 180. So, yeah, that's what happened. But
I started watching wrestling in like 87, 88-ish, and I haven't watched a lot of that stuff. There's some of it that I've watched back, like the Mr. Perfect Bret Hart SummerSlam match, which was awesome.
I was at that match. That was a hell of a match.
Yeah, I seem to remember, like, my favorite Jim Neidhart match, I don't even know really if it's any good, because I probably haven't watched it since 1990, was the SummerSlam...
With Demolition?
Best of 3 Falls match with Demolition. When I was a kid, I thought that match was so awesome.
Yeah, that was a great match.
Okay,
that was great.
It's good to know.
Yeah. The matches, I remember seeing house show matches with the Bulldogs and the Hart Foundation that were like they were really, really good, and they like blew away everything else on the show. I mean, just crisper and faster. But you got to remember that like. And even with that, it's like, at the time, like I was watching Rock and Roll Express and Midnight Express from Jim Crockett Promotions at the time. And it was, like they were 2 steps ahead. I don't say they were 2 steps ahead of Hart Foundation and Bulldogs, but maybe 1 step ahead of them. They were 3 steps ahead of everybody else. But they were still ahead. I mean, it was still like the Midnight Express are legitimately the Midnight Express are one of the greatest teams, this is with the Bobby and Condrey version. I mean, they were one of the greatest teams I have ever seen. They were so good. And the Rock and Roll Express were a great babyface team. I think the Rockers were every bit as good as the Rock and Roll Express and maybe better, but the Rockers never had a Midnight Express to work with. So, they didn't, I remember the Rockers. The best stuff with the Rockers I ever saw was when Tully and Arn jumped, and they worked with Tully and Arn, and those matches were great. But even then, they weren't as good as the Midnight Express Rock and Roll.
It always seems from watching back, because I'm watching a lot of the old NWA now, and they always push the Midnights and the Rock and Rolls as like a main event act. They're a tag team, but they're like a big time main event act. And the Rockers, they were always like an upper mid card act. They never felt like they were pushed as like these guys are on the level of. The world champion. They're just the best tag team in the company, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Midnight Express and Rock and Roll Express headlined a lot of shows. And if they didn't headline, they worked second from the top. And I remember, like, when they would come out here, even if they were third or fourth from the top, that it was the Midnight and Rock and Rolls would be like Ric Flair's match, and you know, Ric Flair, Dusty, and you know, usually if he was against Dusty or whoever Dusty wrestled, you know. But I mean, even Dusty, I gotta say, even Dusty's matches didn't get over like Midnight and Rock and Roll. Ric Flair's matches did. Ric Flair and Dusty did. But if it was Dusty against somebody else, I mean, you know, it got over because Dusty knew how to work a crowd like nobody's business. But you know, the Midnight Express and Rock and Roll Express would bring you to a different level than Dusty could with anyone except for Rick or maybe Tully Blanchard. But those Rock and Roll Midnight matches, I mean, they were so, I mean, they were closer to like what the guys do now. You know, I mean, not quite as wild, but very, very similar to like, you know, what guys do now with just all the spectacular moves, but all the psychology as well. They had everything. And I mean, the Hart Foundation was really good. You know, yeah, I'm trying to think what other stuff that, but yeah, I mean, the WWF always, the tag teams were never pushed at the same level as the Crockett tag teams, because you got to remember that Crockett, the Crockett promotion, from a history standpoint, the World Tag Team Championship was often the main event of the shows. I mean, like during the 70s. So from their history of that company, the tag teams, you know, when you had like Ole and Gene Anderson were usually main event, Ric Flair and Greg Valentine were super main event, super drawing cards, Steamboat and Youngblood. So when Dusty came in and when Flair became a regular as world champion, of course, they were the main event. But before that, it was always the tag team. So the idea of the tag teams in Crockett was always higher, whereas with WWF, the tag teams were they were clearly secondary. You know, like the Rockers were mid-card. To me, really, the Hart Foundation was, you know, usually mid-card. They did try to headline some Hart Foundation Bulldogs matches, but it didn't draw, you know, so much. So then they stopped doing that. So that was like the attempt. But, you know, it's like they were never, when they did that, they were never pushed on television like they were a main thing. So if they did do the house shows with those matches, I mean, the reality was it shouldn't have done it because they weren't pushed at that level. So then when they didn't do it and it didn't draw big, it's kind of like your self-fulfilling prophecy. But you know, obviously, if it wasn't for Jim, Bret would not have been in a position to be that workhorse guy on the team because he wouldn't have gotten the break. And, you know, and Jim was the colorful guy of the two, and at first pushed as the star of the team. You know, in time, Bret became the star of the team. But, you know, and Bret started having like Bret got a lot of appeal, you know, I mean, in the sense that his charisma started to come out, but originally, like, Bret was the really good worker, you know, who didn't have charisma, and Jim was the charisma, and Jimmy Hart was the promo. You know, Jimmy Hart would do the promo, and Jim would do his laugh and say a few cute things, and Bret was kind of like, you know, he'd stand there with the sunglasses, and that was pretty much it. So, yeah, I you know, it was a really tough morning because I know too many, you know, I know a lot of people who knew him really, really well, you know, obviously the family and all that. It's, and, you know, a lot of the wrestlers, obviously he was around forever, you know, so very tough way to start the day. And, I'm just trying to think what else, but yeah, just, super strong guy. Like, you know, he looked strong, obviously, but he was actually stronger than he looked. You know, I mean, I'm sure he was like a 500-pound bench presser type of guy. I think he was. I just remember he was like one of the stronger, you know, because when he went up there to Stampede, you know, he was one of the strongest guys in the world. I don't know if he was like powerlifting one of the strongest guys in the world, but, you know, when you're talking about a world-class shot putter, that's like, you know, real life strength. That's more than just lifting strength. And he was, you know, just naturally like that. I mean, you know, if you look at the pictures of him when he was in high school, I mean, that dude was just a powerhouse guy.
Talk more about Jim Neidhart, I'm sure, over the next couple of days. Another bio, I presume, in the Observer this week with more from his career, including some of the stuff from the hottest era of WWE. Actually, the beginning of the hottest era, when he was part of the, right around the time of the Montreal Screwjob, came back, had the stuff with Shawn. And
Yeah. When they humiliated him on the way out, that was bullshit stuff.
Yep.
I mean, people were sending those pictures out, of the Hart Foundation, and it's like, except for Bret, they all passed away. Owen, Davey, Jim, and Brian Pillman.
That's right.
Man, that hit hard, seeing those pictures. That was hot. That was the Hart Foundation with going against Steve Austin. That show in Calgary that was one of the best. Well, not even one of the best. That was the best WWF pay-per-view that they ever did up until that era. I mean, what a freaking awesome show! Great.
And not only that, like the whole television in that era, like I'm up to mid 99 as I watch every show every week, and the stuff with like Steve Austin, The Rock, and Vince McMahon, like every segment they're in is like a home run. The rest of the shows largely suck, but that 1997 Hart Foundation era, the summer of 97,
awesome.
That's the best stuff up until I guess when they started getting hot, really hot in 2000. But that stuff was so good. It was so good.
Yeah, it was funny because, WCW was winning the ratings and WWF was blowing them away with that angle. I mean, all those guys, the Hart Foundation were so, it's really just that whole, it's really like Bret. I mean, obviously Steve Austin and all of them, but that Bret being the heel who was always right because he really was, what a unique character. And I mean, the whole funny thing about that is that was Bret's idea, and we all thought he was nuts. I mean, Bret, because Pillman and I were real close, and I wasn't close with Bret at all at that time. And Bryan was there, and Bryan just wanted to be a heel. Bryan didn't want to be a babyface. He wanted to be the heel of all heels. But he was linked with Bret and Owen because they were all buddies. And I think they probably put him there because Bryan was so limited in the ring because of his ankle injury. But he was a great personality, but he couldn't go, unfortunately. And so, you put him in there with, Owen was a fantastic worker. Bret was a fantastic worker. Jim was a classic character. I mean, he had the tenure and the credibility there from the old days. And Davey was super talented. He was hit and miss. But when he was motivated, I mean, Davey was big and could do anything. So it was a great group. It was, Bryan had that charisma and everything. And, Bryan was like, Bret wants to be a babyface in Canada and maybe even England too, but he's going to be heel everywhere else. And he goes, that makes no sense. And I go, that'll never work. And he goes, I know that'll never work. And then, I just remember the night of that Calgary Stampede, and he calls me up as Bryan, and he goes, this was the greatest night of my life. He was just like, this was the greatest night of my career. It's like, this is what I always wanted. He goes, I guess Bret was right. I go, I guess Bret was right. So it's kind of funny. But that was, I remember watching that TV, and the stuff with Bret and Shawn, especially, and Austin, was so good. It's like it was so real. You know what I mean? And it's not like I was younger and naive. They were, because it really was real. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I would watch those shows, and I would, like, when the show would be over, I would like call up my friends and I go like, I know you don't believe this, but that interview, that was like real. Because just the stuff that they would say, it was like what they use so much reality to it. And I think that's why, I mean, it's funny because they were losing the ratings at the time, but it was like, that was kind of like when I kind of figured that, you could start seeing that like the, I don't want to say that I thought in 97 it was turning around in the sense of that because WCW really was way ahead. I knew WWE was turning around as far as they were going to get more popular. I didn't know they would beat WCW. I don't think I really felt that they would beat WCW until early '98, when I could see WCW self-destruction coming, and at the same time the ascension of. I mean, maybe late '97. Late '97, I remember thinking WCW is going to have a lot of trouble. There's just things that were coming together. Even before Bret left. Before the Mr. McMahon and all that, I just saw certain things. And I guess it was Austin. Austin was just maybe, and all that. Just Austin was becoming such a hot character. And, so, whatever. I don't know what, as far as, what else, it's just it's just too young. It sucks. It really sucks. So anyway, we'll probably talk more about that later.
Filthy Tom released from the UFC.
Yeah, I'm kind of bummed about that too.
It's bullshit.
Yeah, I know.
I'll just flat out say it.
Okay, well,
he was suspended for 2 years. He asked for his release. They would not give the guy his release. They waited until like 2 months before the suspension was over, and then they released him. I mean, come on.
I know. Well, this is what it looks like because Gleason Tebow also got cut. So what I think it is that for whatever reason, this was the week that they decided to make cuts, and they're both 35. So I think that maybe they were just looking at guys of a certain age, and that they felt that they needed to cut some guys. And it's like I don't think it was related to the idea that they kept him till the end. And then they cut him, but I know, but like if you're going to hold a guy for 2 years under suspension, give the guy one fight. I completely agree with you. I mean, that's the one thing is that like plus here's the other thing. It's like they have all of these 600 anonymous people on the roster. I mean, it's like I'm not saying like Tom. I mean, he's our friend and everything, and he's not top tier superstar or anything, but he's more well known than certainly more than most. I mean, in the sense that people, he was over a little bit. He was over to all the, he was over to a degree, and he knew how to get himself over at the weigh-ins and everything like that. If he was going to fight, it would be a fight on the card that there would be interest in. Which on these cards, most of the fights are fights that people don't have interest in. So, and his last fight was with Corey Anderson. I mean, granted, it was 2 years ago, but the fact is that like, that was a fight that, I remember I was at that one live. I mean, when that fight could have gone either way, it was a very close decision. I mean, I'm not going to say it was a bad decision. But if Tom would have won, it wouldn't have been a bad decision either. And I know that there was one judging card that I thought was really bad. I think there was a round that he clearly won that he wasn't given credit for. But, it was like, Corey Anderson's a good fighter. I mean, he's number 6 in the world or number 6 in the UFC in light heavyweights. And perhaps he's improved some, but still Corey Anderson was a good fighter back then. And Tom went even with him in his last fight. So it's not like he had a bad performance, and he won fights before that. And I think his loss before that was to Francis Carmon. And I thought Tom won that fight too. Again, it was a close fight. So, yeah, I really was, I mean, when I heard, I was actually I was really surprised because I just thought, they need some guys with color anyway. And he's got color, and I just thought I don't know what to say. That was a decision that was made.
I do kind of feel that if his suspension would have been coming up 2 years ago, I don't think they would have cut him. I think that the way that things have changed in UFC over the last 2 years, just everything, the finances, the pay-per-view numbers, the ratings, I mean, I just feel this wouldn't have happened 2 years ago.
Well, I will tell you that I believe that it happened because he was 35 years old, and they just looked at it that way, of the idea that we need young guys. He hasn't fought in 2 years, And because again, I've never heard anyone say anything.
Sounds like Vince McMahon when he got rid of Hogan and Savage because they were too old. Then they went to the other show and kicked everyone's ass.
Look, he may go to Bellator. You know, it's like it's an interesting one because I don't know, like if he was. I'm not sure that Bellator would take him, but I think there's a good shot that they will. I mean, he's going to get, if he wants to fight, there'll be places, but you really want to fight with, in a place with visibility, because I mean, in Bellator, in that light heavyweight division, the champ's Bader, they've got 3 or 4 guys, but if Tom could go in there and hang with those guys, they got Phil Davis, they got King Mo. I don't know. I think, I don't know if they would take him, but I think there's a good shot of it. So we'll see. But I was just, it's just the whole thing. It's just the whole thing was kind of sad because again, the way it went down, because it's like, they should have given him a fight and just see where he's at. I mean, because again, he looked good in his last fight. So, and the fight before he had a great knockout in one of his last fights, the Vellante fight. So, but it's so long ago, and I don't know. That's what it was.
All right, we got to talk about this Raw show, go home show for SummerSlam.
Real quick before we do, I want to make mention that so New Japan has not they have not announced the cards for September, which start back September the 5th. But Tanahashi did an interview, and he pretty much indicated that he was going to defend the briefcase. He certainly made a case that Okada deserves a shot at the briefcase. So it looks like from that interview that there's going to be a Tanahashi Okada match, which I'm going to guess is going to be
cool
on the October show at Sumo Hall, which would probably be the Omega Ishii show. So that's probably going to be one hell of a show.
Sounds like a hell of a show.
That's going to be one hell of a show. Yeah, they're just going to make sure that they don't stick to a 3-hour thing. It's so funny because it's like New Japan doesn't need to do 3-hour shows because they got so many awesome wrestlers, but they are. And WWE needs to do 3-hour shows, and they're doing a freaking 6-hour show on Sunday.
Yeah.
Because they don't have as many awesome wrestlers.
This is just the way it's going to be, everybody.
Yeah, I'm trying to petition New Japan to. I mean, I like the idea of 2.5 to 3-hour shows from New Japan. Don't get me wrong, but not like Sunday because there was too much talent, and when it's like that show is like their equivalent to the Royal Rumble, and it's like there was just too many guys to do that show in 3 hours. I mean, the only match that was good. I mean, the reason that everyone's raving about that show is because the main event was out of this world, but
that's what that show's about. That show's all about that one match.
Well, yeah, but it's like you look at all that. They had Rey Mysterio and the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega and all these people on the show that were, up and down. Juice Robinson and Ishii and everybody. You know what I mean? I mean, just look at the freaking talent on that show, and everybody was in short matches that you don't even remember. And it's like, yeah, it was all about that one match, but they have that show every year. And there's always been a lot of really good matches underneath besides the angles. They did all the angles they were going to do. That's, it didn't hamper the angles, but it definitely hampered the match quality of rushing these guys in and out. And poor Toa Henare. I mean, that guy's good, and he did a 2-minute match because they were just trying to keep the show to 30 minutes, and they didn't want to to 3 hours, and they didn't want to they didn't want to cut down the main event, which obviously they couldn't because the main event had to be. That main event was perfect. You know that? I mean, that was pretty close to a perfect wrestling match. I'm still and it actually relates to tonight because it was just man, I feel sorry for anyone who was watching G1 and then watched the show because it's just it's going to take some time for, you know what I mean?
telling me.
God, it was.
Let's start talking about the show because I got some things I got to say.
Well, I did like the Paul Heyman segment a lot.
Paul Heyman segment was awesome.
Yeah, I like that, and you know what? The last segment, it went a little long before those guys came out, but because it was the Dean Ambrose return, that was a guaranteed segment that was going to work no matter what, and it did. But yeah, when I'm like watching the show, I'm just going like, man, this is it's just not doing it for me at all. It's just they're out there and everyone. It doesn't feel like all these matches that should be like 5 minutes are going like 12.
I say that every week, and then you tell me it's only 5 minutes.
Yeah, it felt like it felt like to me, like it just felt like these matches, and they go through the commercial, and I think that doesn't help either. But it's sometimes like there are some matches, and this is like really bad, okay, because you never should think this. But there were some matches that were there tonight, there were 2 of them, where I was thinking, can we please go to the commercial? And it's like, and I was thinking like, I shouldn't be thinking that. Why am I wanting a commercial? Because I'm thinking that if we go to a commercial, there's going to be, at least we're going to get like something. They're going to have to do something before the commercial. So to you know what I mean? And they weren't doing it. They're just not doing a lot.
Well, listen, I'm going to get going on this show because I got to mention something here about the opening segment. This is going to be the most wacky comparison. And before I even talk about it, I want to say, I was watching this show, and it is abundantly clear. There are WWE fans, and then there's fans of every other promotion in the world. And sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. We hear from them on Twitter, the ones that don't overlap. There was some stuff on this show that I'm just like, this crowd loves this. You know what I mean?
Well, like, they love Braun Strowman. I mean, that... There
was a lot of stuff on this show where this crowd's just, they're so into it. And I'm like, dude, there's been 5 chin locks in this match. It's only been 4 minutes long. But anyway, this opening segment, the crowd loved Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey was great, but... Okay, so listen. You were just talking about...
2 different segments.
You were just talking about this Tanahashi defending the briefcase against Okada, okay?
I don't know how you're going to make an analogy.
I'm gonna. We suggested this a couple of days ago. Why? Why do we suggest it? Because it makes sense. Because Tanahashi has not been able to beat Okada.
In 2 years.
In 2 years, they go to the G1. He can't beat him in the G1. They go to a 30-minute draw. Then he wins. So, what makes sense? Okada going for the briefcase against Tanahashi. Can Tanahashi finally beat this guy? Right?
Yeah.
So I'm watching this opening segment. Are you ready for this comparison? Okay. So Ronda Rousey.
I have something to say about the segment. Go ahead.
Ronda Rousey comes out, and she gives her speech about Jim Neidhart, which is very nice. Fans are chanting for Natty. Natty is supposed to be having a match tonight against Alexa, but Natty's not there. So Ronda calls out Ember Moon. Ember Moon is going to have a match with Alicia. Or with Alicia.
Wait, is that when she goes the Shinam, right?
Shinam.
And I was like, oh, that just made me cringe.
Okay, so let me get to this. So Alexa comes out with Alicia Fox. Alexa says, she's talking about SummerSlam and everything like that, and she says, I'm sick of Kurt Angle protecting every other champion on this roster except me. So what I have done is I have talked to Constable Corbin, and I am not going down there to that ring tonight unless I have personal security. So they bring out this personal security. There's 4 grown men, flak jackets and everything. So they get in the ring. Alexa shoves Ember into Ronda. Ronda goes after the security guys. This part's actually awesome. She beats the shit out of 3 of these guys, turns around, the 4th guy takes one look at Ronda, he runs for his life. The place is going crazy. This is awesome. So they go to commercial, and they come back, and guess what? They have a match. Alexa Bliss is down there with Ronda Rousey, and she has no security. And it's like everything that they just told us, it just is like it never happened. She wasn't going to go down to the ring unless she had security. Ronda Rousey beats up 4 security guards, and then what do? They expect us to forget all of that, and she just goes down to the ring for this segment, where, by the way, she got her ass kicked by Ronda Rousey again.
Yeah.
I can't watch one segment on this show without them doing something that makes sense.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with that at all.
I totally did. It was so stupid.
Yeah, my problem was is she did the thing. I felt really, I mean, if you know Ronda's background, Ronda lost her father when she was 8 years old. So when she started talking, I mean, that was, part of me was going like, I wish that they did this as a pre-tape. She got through it, and then she starts doing her wrestling promo. And as soon as she starts doing her wrestling promo, it's like, this needed to be two different segments, because the thing that hit me, one of the worst things I ever saw in wrestling, and this wasn't that, but it immediately reminded me of what was in when Gino Hernandez died. Okay, the week before Gino Hernandez died, or 2 weeks before, whatever, it might have been 2 weeks before, but they did an angle. Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez were a tag team, and they were going to turn Chris Adams back babyface. God only knows why. It wasn't a good idea, but that's what they did. So to turn him babyface, they did the Freddie Blassie, John Tolis angle, where Gino Hernandez threw powder or something, liquid. I forget what he threw, but he blinded Chris Adams for life. And magically, of course, Chris's vision came back after a tour of Japan, probably, or who knows what. So Bill Mercer opens the show, and then Gino dies of a drug overdose. Which, by the way, there will be a segment on Vice TV sometime in the next couple of months on Gino Hernandez that I'm just going to tell you, it will blow your frickin' mind. I know some of it. I'm not allowed to say any of it because I don't know if I was actually interviewed for it, but they came here to do a bunch of interviews, and there's maybe 10 shows that they're doing, but the one that they were telling me all the Gino Hernandez stuff, and it's just like, oh my God. Well, anyway, so Bill Mercer on the show goes, we've had two horrible tragedies today, or this week. Chris Adams is blind and Gino Hernandez is dead. And it's just like, how can you fucking do this? It's like Gino Hernandez really died and Chris Adams is a wrestling angle. And Ronda's out there, and it's like Jim Neidhart really died. And Ronda is talking in the back of her head. She's thinking about the fact that, at the age of 8, she didn't have her father anymore because her father committed suicide after he was, he became a paraplegic from a snowboarding accident. And you send her out there, and she's got to do this thing. And then on the same promo, no commercial break, no nothing, she's out there talking about SummerSlam and this and that. And it's like, you're going, it's like you can't do both at the same time. You got to do a break. When she started doing that, it's just like, oh God, I couldn't handle going from really, really real to just totally contrived, just, and then Alexa's out there, and I thought Alexa did a hell of a promo, but you needed a commercial break. You needed a buffer. You got to get out of the mood. I was in the mood of feeling so sorry for Ronda and feeling so sorry for Natalya and just being sad about Jim Neidhart. And they're trying to hit me with this, immediately with this pro wrestling, I know it's what the pro wrestling TV show is supposed to be, which is all the stuff and build and everything. And I'm not against that they did it, but I just felt like not in the same thing without a break. It just felt all wrong to me.
I'm sure it would be better with a break, but I rarely will fault anything that people do on the day that somebody passes away because there's so much stuff going through people's mind. Ronda may have said, I want to start like this. I want to go out there and say something at the beginning of the show about Jim Neidhart. Natty's my friend. Who knows what even happened right there? It would have been better to do it in two separate segments, but I mean, they did what they did, and
I know, and
I
they
don't
did
fault anybody.
I know they did a nice video for him later in the show and everything. It just looked like when Alexa's doing that promo, I'm going this is a really good promo, but it felt so disrespectful to me for them to be doing this promo, walking over the last segment, or the last, or what Ronda said. So that was kind of my thought. But then they do this match with Ember Moon and Alexa, and it's like, it's long, goes through a break. I just couldn't get into the match.
Do this match, and so security's no longer there. Ronda goes after Alicia. Alexa jumps Ronda. and tosses her into the barricade. Ember goes up top for the Eclipse. Alicia breaks it up for the DQ. So, heading into Ronda versus Alexa for the title, Ember Moon had Alexa beaten here in this match.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Ronda kicks Alicia's ass. She kicks everybody's ass. Segment got over huge because of Ronda, and let me say one more positive thing about Ronda Rousey. I watched so many man-on-women matches in Lucha Underground with people like Sexy Star. It's completely unbelievable. But Ronda Rousey, the thing with her beating up men is if you can feed her correctly, she is really going to throw your ass 30 feet in the air.
Yeah, her throws
It's totally believable when she throws these dudes around and kicks their asses. That's what the people want to see is Ronda beating people up. And she can believably beat up the women, and she can believably beat up the men, and it's getting over.
Okay, but there is... you don't want to overdo her beating up with the men, okay? Because in time, people will resent that.
They will, but they will not resent her beating up 4 faceless security geeks.
No, not faceless security guards. But I'm just saying that, like, don't let it get too out of hand. But I mean, in this segment, yeah, she was great because the whole thing is like, she beat them up with those judo throws, and the fact is that legitimately, if you charge her, and you're a 200-pound guy and you charge her, she can throw you because she'll use your momentum against you. So, and it looks good. And yeah, the segment, it got over. I mean, the Ronda stuff got over. The match, I mean, there was nothing bad about the match, but it was like, it's a 13-minute match that was probably should have been 6.
That went 13 minutes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So then we had the Kurt Angle segment with Constable Corbin. And Corbin says she approved these 2 matches. He's heading to the ring. So he leaves, and Drew and Dolph show up. Seth Rollins is supposed to sign a contract later. He's not there. Kurt says he was in China, and he had transportation issues from China.
He was in China.
But he's going to be there tonight.
Yeah.
So he says, wait somewhere else. So Corbin faces Tyler Breeze. The story is that he booked himself in this match, and he's booked another match for Finn later.
Poor Tyler Breeze.
Poor me. This match went... How long was this match?
4 minutes. It wasn't that long.
This fucking match was 4 minutes long. The first thing Corbin does is a chin lock. He puts him in a chin lock for like 2 minutes, throws him in the barricade. He walks around for a while. He puts him in another chin lock in a 4-minute match, and then deep sixes him for the pin. Do you need 2 chin locks in a 4-minute TV match with Tyler Breeze?
I don't know. I've been sparing Corbin, and it was short, so,
It sucked.
I mean, yeah, I was thinking, like, when I was watching this match, I thought maybe I was, like, still, like, on that G1 thing, because when I'm watching, I'm going, like, this match sucks.
Dude, G1 or not, if you can't do a 4-minute match without 2 chin locks, I don't even know what to tell you.
Come on. Sometimes holds are cool, but, I mean...
Are you defending the 2 chin locks? Because not one of these holds was cool.
I'm not defending anything about the match. I mean, look, once Baron Corbin's in there wrestling in that freaking outfit that he wrestles in, it's like, it's already a negative. You know what I mean? It's already like it's a clown show. So, at that point, if he's going to do chin locks in that outfit or not, the only thing I remember about the match is like, they're just doing nothing, and then they're just doing nothing. And I kept thinking, poor Tyler Breeze. I know the guy's talented because when he was in NXT, he was like really over, and he's booked to be such a joke. And nothing's going on. And then, there's a deep 6 and it's over.
Yep. So then he calls out Jinder for the match with Finn Balor. And he says, since Finn is tough, surely he can take on 2 men. He has 2 opponents tonight, the other Kevin Owens. So it's going to be a handicap match, but Kurt Angle comes out, says it's now a tag match, and Finn's partner is Braun Strowman. So we have Braun and Finn versus Owens and Jinder. How long was this match?
14 minutes.
14 minutes. So Braun comes out. He's super over.
Braun was really over.
He's over.
Yeah.
So they're doing this match. I swear to God this happens. They get the heat on Finn. Braun makes a hot tag. He's running wild on everybody. There's a big dive to the outside. They're setting up for the finish. They go to commercial.
Then they
come back, and they've literally started over. They're getting the heat on Finn for a second time.
Yeah.
They put him in chin locks. They put him in holds. Finally, Braun makes a second comeback, runs wild again, And then he hits his End of Days or whatever.
Power Slam.
Power Slam on Jinder.
And End of Days is Baron Corbin.
Well, Baron Corbin hit Balor with the End of Days afterwards. That's where I got confused. But anyway, Braun won. Everybody cheered. He chases Kevin Owens to the back. And then Corbin sneaks in, gives Balor the End of Days. And that's it. It's not like this was bad, but dude.
Yeah, it was okay.
The same match twice for 14 minutes.
Yeah. This match was... I thought it was okay. I was kind of, with Finn Balor in there, I kind of like have high expectations, and it didn't happen.
No.
Maybe that's Jinder. I don't know.
We had Ricky Roberts, an alleged country singer, in the ring. Says Elias is his favorite wrestler. He doesn't know how to play guitar, but someday he'll learn. He'll find himself in the Country Music Hall of Fame. Elias comes out, says, "You don't impress me, but if you can beat Bobby Lashley tonight, you will impress me."
They did this before this. They did the stuff with Kurt Angle and Ziggler and Drew McIntyre where they talked about where
that was much earlier.
No, they did second. They did one right here.
Huh.
And I think this was the segment where they said that they kind of foretold the Dean Ambrose thing. Where
no, that was later.
Was it?
That was after the B team match.
Okay, well
they're upset that in the contract Seth is allowed to have a corner man.
Yeah, but they were in there. They were backstage, and they did a big Seth Rollins package, and then the guy who was supposed to be a country music singer came out, and then Elias came out, and he said that he sold out WrestleMania 3 times this year alone. Wow.
So Lashley comes out. He's taken off his ring gear. Ricky Roberts hits him with the guitar. Ricky Roberts, by the way. Or if it's Rock and Roll Express.
Yeah.
So Lashley hits the guy with a one-arm power bomb deal. And they just played his music. Didn't even pin the guy.
Was it a match?
Well, it was a match when Elias specifically said, if you beat Bobby Lashley tonight, that'll impress me. That sounds like a match.
Yeah, but the bell never rang.
Anyway, who cares? That was a segment. B-team meeting. Bo's all concerned. They now have a 33.33333% chance of winning tonight. I pretty much quit right there. Then we had the 3-way B-team Revival, Hardy and White for the tag team titles.
They worked their asses off. They worked their freaking asses off. I mean, it was they were out there. They did everything they could to get over. I mean,
they did a middle rope superplex with Matt off the top onto the crowd. Bray hit the Sister Abigail, or he goes for it, on both of the Revival. They avoid it. They turn to the Shatter Machine. Axel hits the ring, tosses Dawson outside, covers Bray for the pin. They did really work hard.
They worked really hard.
But it's the B team. And it's a total comedy act.
The match didn't really
The
get
superstars laugh at them backstage like Roman Reigns.
Yeah. That's they did. So when they did the superplex spot, the crowd, like they did, Dash Wilder did a dive, and then everybody was doing big. Well, actually, he did a dive, and then Bray caught him when he did the dive, and gave him a uranagi on the ring apron. I mean, this was like everything that how I say that, like WWE says that they don't do, all in like 2 minutes. Just crazy, dangerous spots. Not super dangerous. I mean, compared to some of the stuff I've seen in the last couple of weeks, but dangerous. And then Matt does this superplex to the floor, but everyone caught him and all that. And then they went and did their finish. And but the crowd, like when he did the superplex spot, the crowd like all of a sudden was like, "Oh my God, this is like really good." Because before they're doing all these big moves, and the crowd's just not caring, because it's like the B team is
it's a comedy division now with the B team as champions.
Yeah, like when the B team is out, I think everyone likes the B team because it's kind of like, the cheesy music and the over enthusiastic stuff. It's kind of fun, but once the bell rings, it's like there's nothing. It's not that it's bad, but because they're that comedy act, the people don't really care once the bell rings. And plus, the Revival, who are just great, have been given no credibility at all. Although they did. So anyway, we got Revival against the B team. for the tag team titles on the pre-show, which also elevates those belts even better because they're probably kicking off the pre-show like 90 minutes before the regular show starts.
That's right.
And Cedric Alexander and Drew Gulak has been moved to the pre-show.
And so, by the way, for those who are keeping track, 13 matches.
Oh, is that what it is now?
13 matches on SummerSlam.
Oh, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's a 6-hour. It's going to be a 6-hour show, whether it was 12, 11, or 13. So, it's the length is the same. So it's 6-hour show.
Dolph and Drew met with Kurt, unhappy about the cornerman deal, which played out in the main event. So Roman Reigns comes out for the best segment on the show. This was awesome. He's booed unmercifully.
It wasn't that bad.
Well, it came and went. When he first came out, he's booed unmercifully.
It wasn't as bad as like I expected. He was definitely booed by some, but he was also cheered by some. This crowd was.
It all depended on what he said.
Yeah,
I've got it all written down. Cheer for cheer.
Yeah, what was interesting to me was when this segment was over. When Heyman does the Heyman turns on him and all that, and all three announcers. This made me cringe. All three announcers. We didn't see this coming. And you could tell, first of all, number one, Roman Reigns was skeptical the whole time. And while there were people who actually were cheering the idea of Paul Heyman managing Roman Reigns, I mean, there were definitely, like when Paul wanted Roman Reigns, to agree to be his guy, there were yes chants, but they were also the minority of the people. Pretty much, I would, guess 60 to 70% of the crowd did not buy it for a second. And then the announcers go, they fooled everyone. And it's like, I'm watching. It's like, how can you do this? I mean, I'm sure almost everyone at home wasn't fooled. Clearly, almost, the majority of the crowd wasn't fooled. And you're trying to act like they fooled everyone.
So he comes out. They play his music. He gets booed. He talks about how every day his motto is "Leave this place better than you found it." Says
that's like the legitimate thing that they tell all the top guys to say.
He's sick of Brock. He's got to go. It'll end this Sunday. He's going to send the guy packing. That got cheered a little. Says he's going to win the title. That got booed a little. Says he's going to send Brock's head up Dana's ass. That got cheered.
That was an easy one.
Heyman comes out. He's in a great mood. Says this week is history. Why wait until Sunday to make history? Tonight, he says, last week, in that interview about Brock Lesnar, I said you had no chance to win unless. And the unless is, if you listen to me, I've got all the answers. You think you can beat Brock. If you have me in your corner, you'll know that you can beat Brock. Crowd cheered that. Paul extended his hand. Fans chanted, yes, yes, yes. Roman says...
It was still only there was definitely a chant, but you could see most of the crowd didn't buy it at all.
Roman says, this is what we don't get. I don't need your scoops. I beat him in Saudi Arabia. He wouldn't have made it out of the cage if I didn't spear him through it, and it would have ended earlier if it wasn't for you. Paul says, guilty as charged. It was because of me. But I don't want to talk about the past. I want to talk about the future. I'm the future, and next week, you and I can stand together after you slay the beast. Fans start chanting, we want Lesnar. Paul tries to drown him out. He wants to be Roman's advocate. Got a mix of cheers and boos. Roman talks about his childhood, being groomed from a young age to do this. Paul then says, when I was 16, I was driving around with Offen Sika, and your father taught me something he taught all of his sons, and he utters some phrase in Samoan. And Roman is shocked. Paul says, he told me that. And he says, I've got this agreement here. I want you to read it. Look it over. Don't answer tonight. You can tell me on Sunday. So Roman starts to look at this piece of paper, and then Paul suddenly starts spraying him madly in the eyes with pepper spray. Roman's down. He's blinded. Brock's music hits. He comes out, significantly smaller than any Brock Lesnar I've seen in years. Puts this guy in the guillotine, chokes him out, starts to head to the back, goes back to the ring one more time, grabs Roman, F5s him. Fans chant one more time. Brock just heads to the back. Brock was so great. Heyman was great. Roman was great. Crowd was into all of it one way or the other. Hey.
It was a great segment.
They got people caring about the guys. They may hate him. They may love him. But they care about this storyline.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be very interesting on Sunday. because
And Brock looks so much healthier at this weight.
he does look healthier.
Yeah.
He
I
does
know
look
old
healthier.
habits die hard, but he looks so much healthier at this weight.
Yeah. But is he going to lose what he had?
Well, he sure didn't frickin' lose it tonight. He was awesome. The place was going nuts for this
No,
guy.
I'm talking about as a fighter.
Oh, he's a fighter, he might.
Yeah, that's what I mean. No,
Another
not
matter
this.
entirely.
Yeah. No, I mean, as far as like the match, it'll be interesting to see what he'll do in the match, how far he'll go.
Yeah, if you recall, the last time he was going to go to UFC, he had that match with Dean Ambrose that sucked.
He wouldn't do nothing.
He wouldn't do a thing in that match.
Yeah.
So, find out Sunday. Could be a quick one.
Could be.
We had Mojo and the Authors of
That might
Pain.
not be that might not be the worst idea in the world.
I mean, if the guy's leaving and you're trying to coordinate Roman Reigns, you should go in there and just destroy the guy, smash him, obliterate him, and beat him and win the title. That's it.
Well, we'll see what they do. But I mean,
Especially if the crowd's going to hijack the match. Just get it over with then.
I think that's probably with the mentality. Okay, so I think the mentality should be this. If you can sense that the crowd is just going to kill the match, then do it in 3 minutes. If the crowd's fine with the match and they're going to go with the match, then give them the match.
So basically, we're talking 3 minutes here.
No, we're waiting for the crowd. I think they should go in there with two. I think they should go in there with one.
I'm making a prediction right here in New York.
Well, you very well could be right.
Don't think they're going to give this match a chance.
Yeah, I think that they should come up with 2 matches. I really do, because if the crowd wants a good match, give them a good match. If the crowd does not want a good match, I mean, granted, it's the majority are at home, but the worst thing that they could do is go out there and go 25 minutes or 18 minutes where the crowd just shitting on it, because then it just ruins everything. It ruins the coronation. If it's 3 minutes and they do it, at least it's over with.
Mojo and the Authors of Pain versus Bobby Roode, Titus Worldwide. Basic match, babyface comeback. Roode hits Mojo with the Glorious DDT, gets the pin.
That came so quick, and poor Mojo.
That's 2 weeks now.
Yeah, I thought they were going to do something with him, and they're just not. And goddamn, the Authors of Pain. It's another one.
Yep.
Everybody thought they were going to get this big push, and boy, have they stalled.
Roman's getting his eyes cleaned backstage. We get the Jim Neidhart video package. Ruby Riott, Sasha Banks. Yes. Sasha and Bayley are now the Boss and Hug Connection. An all-time horrible name to go with this all-time horrible storyline.
That is a terrible name.
Sasha gets into the steps, acts like she hurts her hand. Ruby works over the hand. She makes a comeback, dives on a Logan outside. Bayley lays out Liv with a clothesline. Sasha is in control. She gets in the ring, cradled and pinned. What's up with this stupid thing?
Well, Ruby should have won. It's her first week back. That's
Sasha and Bayley lost last week too.
Well, whatever. They're not. It doesn't. What does it matter? You know what I mean? They look. If either of them had great momentum, I'd go, well, you're hurting their momentum. They got nothing. I wish they did, but they don't. So, whatever.
Corbin yells it.
I'll tell you what. I mean, like between that Authors of Pain match and this match, so late in the show, they better hope that everybody knew that Dean Ambrose was coming out. And granted, they did tease it enough, because if people didn't know Dean Ambrose was coming out, I could really see a bad third hour here.
So Kurt comes out and says the good news. He says the good news is Roman can still compete at SummerSlam. Everybody boos.
I know.
He says, I'm not going to suspend or strip Brock of the title. I want Roman to kick his ass, bring the belt back home to Raw. Brock is the worst champion of all time. He's interrupted by Dolph and Drew. So this is an overrun segment. So that means they've got 10 minutes here. So Dolph says, Seth isn't here. Let's end this thing. It's going to be a forfeit. I'm not going to wrestle at SummerSlam. I'm not defending my title. Let's just do this. Get it over with. Kurt calls out Seth. No Seth. Dolph then goes on. And he wasn't bad, but he just went on for 5 minutes. Just ranting and screaming at the fans. Clearly written by Vince McMahon. The fans are fickle.
You know, when you do that stuff, it's such a disconnect, because it's I don't know. I don't know if it's him or what, but it really dragged bad.
He just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, I think it was the material. I don't necessarily think. I mean, maybe it's the deliverer to a degree, but the material was really. It's like I know the lines and everything like that, and it's usually easy heat, but they'd go to that well so often, and I was just when they started doing it, it's like, oh, not this again. This.
The key line is he says the fans turn their backs on me. They'll turn their backs on Seth. They'll turn their backs on the next guy. They never stop turning their backs on people. And I'm right. Well, because this company can't book a babyface. Of course they turn on everybody. You kidding me?
That's right. There you go.
So finally, Dolph says, all right, this match is going to be forfeited. So let me sign the contract and get it over with. I was like, what? So he signs the contract, but I'm not sure how that creates a forfeit. And then Seth's music
well,
hits.
it actually, okay, so if you sign the contract and the other guy doesn't, I guess technically you could say it's a forfeit, but I mean, it's the storyline they were trying to play.
Anyway, Seth comes out, says, I've actually been here a while. I didn't want to come out until Dolph signed. I was afraid if he didn't sign, he'd back out when he heard that I've got a corner man. I was dealing with travel issues. They weren't mine. I have someone to be in my corner. Dean Ambrose's music hits. He comes out looking like Curtis Axel. He's got a beard. He's cut his hair short. He's bulked up. Hits the ring. They clear the ring of both guys. Place goes nuts. That's how the show goes off the air. People love the return of Ambrose. It was a good return.
Yeah.
And it was
that was a can't miss, though.
Yeah, good ending segment right there outside of Dolph just rambling on for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's Raw. Let's do a couple mailbag questions here. Bert says, in Bret's book, he talks about his relationship with Kerry Von Erich in the early 90s. Does he have any kind of relationship with Kevin, since they've gone through similar tragedies with their families?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if he's... I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
Bert says, what do you think the possibility is for SummerSlam they don't have Reigns and Lesnar go on last, and they put, for example, the Intercontinental title match last?
I think it's more likely they would put AJ and Joe or Ronda Rousey's match last.
Well, hey, when they plugged the SummerSlam show on the show tonight and ran over all the matches, they didn't announce Ronda's match for last.
Yeah, I don't think they'll put Ronda's match on last. But they could, because she's, one of the big stars.
And they did put the Intercontinental title on match, or the match on last a couple of pay-per-views ago, and that was a disaster.
Yeah, but that's because they thought they were going to tear down the house with the Iron Man match, which didn't happen. It's not, I don't know that it's the worst idea to put that Roman Reigns match on in the middle and go with AJ and Joe last. Because the one thing with AJ and Joe is the crowd won't shit on it, for sure. And they'll, 6 hours, let me tell you something, 6 hours in, they're asking for trouble with Lesnar and Roman Reigns 6 hours in. AJ and Joe will get the benefit of the doubt, and they'll probably have a better match. So they'll probably put Roman Reigns on last. Yeah.
Bert says at the end of 95 in WWF, it seemed they were building into a program between Alundra Blayze and Aja Kong.
They were.
Then out of the blue, they released all the women and killed off the division. Why was it ended so abruptly? And why, after the Luger incident, was Alundra released with a no-compete clause, without a no-compete?
She wasn't released. She was, yeah. How long before they did that? It was only a couple weeks. So they probably hadn't thought of the no-compete thing. That's probably where, maybe one of the reasons the no-compete thing came in. As far as they were going to do a program with Aja Kong, they brought in Aja Kong, and she came in there, and she freaked them all out. She worked with, I forgot who the woman was. Might have been Candy Okutsu. But anyway, she worked, so she's working like twice as stiff as any of the guys. She did a pile driver that was like absolutely sick. She did a spinning back fist that like busted the other girl's nose. And these old white men who had like never seen women do this, because in Japan, the women did, blade jobs and everything like this, and they beat the shit out of each other. But in the United States, they'd never seen this. And it was like, what the fuck is this? We can't have this. And they just freaked out. And that was it. Now, I think the idea at some point, now what about the Bertha Faye thing had already run its course, right? Alundra Blayze and Bertha Faye, they had that really terrible angle after they fired Bull Nakano. Because Bull and Alundra went at each other for like months and months. And I mean, it was good, but it was just the same match over and over and over again. And Bull got busted for cocaine and got fired. And they brought in Bertha Faye, which was terrible. And then I guess it was Asha Kong after they ran through the Bertha Faye stuff. And then when the Asha thing fell through, they just ditched the women's division. And then she ended up on Nitro throwing the belt in the garbage can, yeah.
All right, this person says, any particular reason Asuka's not been used on TV for quite a while now?
I don't know. Just booking. They have no, she's not.
They can't come up with anything for Asuka.
They got 13 matches already. I'm not going to complain about that. You want a 14th match?
And you could add her to the women's SmackDown Tag Team title match.
Yeah, they could make it a 4-way, but then you dilute it even more.
Great. Let's dilute as much of Carmella as possible.
No, because there's a story here with Charlotte and Becky Lynch. There's a story there, as far as the best friends. When you put Asuka in, it changes the story and dilutes it. Asuka's been in 2 crappy matches with Carmella already. It's time for her to take a break. So that's all it is. She doesn't have a match on SummerSlam, so there's no reason to focus on her too much right now.
This person here says, any truth? Oh, no, I don't want to ask that one.
Hey, tell me about your book. I didn't get to read it yet.
I haven't written it yet.
Oh.
I'm just getting started on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. 100 things that WWE fans should know or do before they die.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's going to be that's the book. There's a whole series of them, so this one will be on WWE.
Yeah.
So, just getting started on it. It won't be out till next year's SummerSlam.
Mm-hmm.
Why do some Japanese wrestlers use all caps lettering for their names like Shida, Sanada, and Kenta?
It's just what they do when they use one. In some cases, when you use the one-word name instead of the real name, you use all capitals. In fact, usually when you use the one-word name instead of the real name, that's what you do.
Sport says, regarding the women's evolution, do you feel WWE would be sending a much bigger statement if they had the women main event a pay-per-view, such as WrestleMania or SummerSlam, as opposed to them having their own pay-per-view?
No, they're going to do both, so it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, a main event at WrestleMania means more than, well, either way, it's not an issue that really, like, either or. They're going to do both anyway, so it's fine. I'm sure that the plan right now is Charlotte and Ronda to main event WrestleMania, and they're going to do an all women's pay-per-view in October. So they're going to do both, and they're both fine.
This person here says, with WWE looking to do stadium shows overseas more often, and with them perhaps having a desire to strike back at New Japan for the MSG show, could you see WWE booking a date at the Tokyo Dome?
They want to. They could do it. They've done it in the past with mixed results. So, I mean, the reason I would say I wouldn't do it is because they're not selling out the arenas. I mean, they didn't sell out. They sold 8,000 tickets for the last shows that they did. So why would you go book a 45,000 seat building when you're selling 8,000 tickets? Now, granted, if they did the Tokyo Dome, I'm sure they'd sell a lot more than 8,000 tickets, just because the idea of them going to the Tokyo Dome itself would be a draw. So you could do it. But I mean, you're probably not going to fill the Tokyo Dome. I mean, when they were, when they had Hulk Hogan, they couldn't fill the Tokyo Dome. So I don't think that they're going to be able to do it now.
Finally, this person says, can Dave clarify what he wrote about in this week's Observer, where he says, in addition, expand NXT to taping every other week, and taping essentially 2 one-hour TV shows per week. One would remain a WWE Network exclusive. The other would be Tuesday or Wednesday night on FS1.
Yeah, that's kind of my idea, to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. There's too much talent in NXT right now.
Wait, this is your idea, or this has been discussed?
It's my idea.
Okay.
This is completely my idea. I have not heard one person discuss this.
Okay, because he seems to think that this is. He says, please clarify what you wrote in this week's Observer about the possible changes to NXT that have been discussed. So apparently he thinks that this has been discussed.
No, it's my suggestion. And also the reasons why there's a good chance they wouldn't do it, because poor Paul Levesque and all the people in NXT having to go and tape every other week. Because if you're going to tape 4 hours, I mean, if you're going to do 2 shows a week, that's at best you're going to be getting 2 weeks of taping done at once. And it's just, with them, in the old situation, it wasn't too bad because you're doing Monday, Tuesday, and then, okay, you add a Wednesday. And sometimes you have a Sunday. I mean, it's still hard. But when you're doing a Monday and a Friday, where you're flying to both cities as opposed to flying to one and then doing a short drive to the other for the Monday, Tuesday thing, and then maybe a flight to, if you're doing a flight on Monday, then flying back, then flying to Florida for Wednesday, then flying back, then flying to wherever on Friday, and then flying back, it's like when you're in the office. So it's like, it'd be extremely hard. It's not impossible, but it'd be really hard on Levesque and all the guys that are, in his office, in his division. And Vince, wouldn't be, it's going to be harder for everyone because, usually it's like Monday, Tuesday, and now Monday, Friday. It's just much, it's going to, look, that's, they're making so much money, they have to do it. But that's why I'm saying, like, for NXT to tape, more than, like, it's one thing you do it once a month, that's whatever. But if you're going to tape it every other week, that's tough. But my thought is that you kill 2 birds with one stone. You keep NXT on the WWE network with a show, and then you also get a show on FS1, which will expand NXT's reach, will make their stars bigger stars. You might be able to get some extra money because God knows FS1 is going to need programming when UFC is gone. And by FS1 standards, NXT will do fine ratings-wise, probably good ratings-wise. So, and also the other thing is that they've got so many guys down there, and it's like a 1 hour TV show. You just you don't have time for everybody, especially now in 2019, when they're wanting to, sign up everybody who might be able to help anybody else. That's a lot of people. So, it's like they're going to need more television, or else you're just going to have all these guys. Because look at guys like Dijak. Dijak he's like a big, agile guy. He's really good, and you just don't, it's like he disappeared in it. Like, he works house shows, but you never hear about him. And I mean, look at they're bringing in all those new women, and yeah, I mean, just 2 hours a week would at least get more people exposure. But it's that was just my suggestion, and I also said why I think that they, may not do it, and for very good reasons. But I do think that but they do need. I mean, I don't want to suggest a 2 hour television show on the WWE network because I think 1 hour is plenty for NXT. But I do think that you could do 2 1 hour shows with that brand right now, especially with the talent that they're going to probably have in a year with that brand. So that was just my thought.
All right, everybody, we are out of time. We'll be back again on Wednesday with more. New back issue of The Observer's up. New Observer on Wednesday. Lots of shows coming up, lots of great stuff, so check it out. And that is it. We will talk to you again after a while.